The bifurcated housing market, the tale of two housing markets. So Lance Lambert has got some good content out there with Resi Club, and he posted a couple charts on how the Sun Belt is, and this is my interpretation of it. The Sun Belt states are basically going down in value, and then the Midwest and the Northeast states are going up in value or holding steady. So it's really kind of a break from where we were COVID. So during COVID, everyone went to these were my initial theories, and then I've got some information that kind of proves me wrong. That people got to work from home. They were able to, rather than live in the cold, go move down to the sunny states, live in Florida, Texas, along the coast, South Carolina, that kind of stuff. And that created an extra demand and a push for Arizona and those housing markets. So it flooded an extra set of demand that really wasn't there before. And then as this work from home, a lot of these companies are calling their workforce back. These people then have to come back and then go to the office. That they don't have that luxury. And then a few other things have happened in the meantime, right? The massive buildup and building, to meet that demand. And then a lot of natural disasters and the insurance rates going absolutely through the roof. So that creates additional cost. And then there was kind of I'm going to call it a bubble with the short-term rentals, the Airbnbs, and that kind of market where people thought they could go buy the house, go spend a couple weeks there, and then it would cash flow, that kind of thing. So all that kind of led to this big buildup of demand in the Sun Belt, and then that's all pulling back. And with higher interest rates, all that demand is sucking back. So then the other theory is all the builders overbuilt supply in those markets, and so all of these contribute to it. So what I decided to do is now that we have the tools at our disposal with artificial intelligence and Perplexity and Grok and all these fancy tools, you can do a lot of quick research. So what I wanted to find out is what's going on down there. What is the primary driver? So my initial belief is the work from home, that demand is being sucked back. That housing market exploded in the Sun Belt, not based on jobs. Our true metric, like years ago, or I did a lot of training with Builders Association, National Association of Home Builders, and they would teach us do to do the market research on based on jobs, right? So every 1.2 or 1.5 jobs, you'd need a housing unit, and then that kind of housing unit depend on the job that was created. So I started looking at that old metric. In fact, if you go on the National Association of Home Builders, they'll tell you what markets need housing supply based on that jobs metric. And city planners use this, metro regions use this. And what they want is they want about 1.3 to 1.5 housing or jobs per housing unit. And what that does is that creates a stable market. So the higher the number of jobs to housing unit, the more demand there is for housing. So if you have like 2 jobs for every housing unit, you're going to have a run up in prices. You're going to have multiple offers. You're going to have people competing for housing. If you're down around 1 or under 1, you're going to see a crash in house prices because the people are going to have to travel a lot further for work to support themselves. So this has always been the basis of what city planners use, what regional directors use, and then what the National Association of Home Builders and the local builders associations, and then all the larger builders would use this metric to determine what the demand was for housing. So based on the tools, and I kind of know how to do the formula, I can punch it in and see what it gets. Hey, Seafull, sorry about that. I did log on earlier to start this, and I had a lot of technical difficulties, and then my wife cooked dinner, so I just took a short break, reset the computer, and came back. So hopefully the sound is okay. Give me a thumbs up if the sound is coming okay now. So I'll show you Lance Lambert's chart, and this is kind of what started this. And this has been kind of, plaguing me in the back of my head on what I wanted to look at. So basically, we have the 1 year change in metro level home prices between June 2024 and 2025. So this was a year prior. But basically, the red is going down in value and the blue is going up in value, and kind of that yellowish is kind of holding steady, holding value. So this is Lance Lambert's data. Good stuff. And as you can kind of see, this is where all that boom happened during COVID, when everyone, thought they could work from home and live anywhere, buy short-term rentals, and then have it pay for it and travel and work from wherever, work from the beach kind of thing. And even the Pacific Northwest did pretty well. Colorado did pretty well too during that time. The Rust Belt, the Midwest, and Northeast lost a lot, and that also had to do with like taxes. And back in that time, Florida housing and Texas housing was relatively inexpensive. That quickly changed during the run up. So this is what kind of triggered my questioning. So if we go into this, I'll share this tab instead. This is a 1 year change in home prices, America's 50 largest metros between June 2024 and 2025. This is not the map version, but this kind of shows us the percentage. So what is that? Cincinnati, Ohio has about a 4% increase here. And then you get into my market here in Minneapolis, we're probably sitting around just under 2%, 1.5%, 2% price increase. And then you get into like Tampa and Austin, you're down under 5% price growth. And Dallas, you're probably sitting at 3.5% down. So this is the number I want to look at. And to do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this chart, and I am going to put that on here. Okay, so now you can see this. So I have Lance Lambert's graph here, and the red is markets where the house prices are going down, and the blue is going up. So what I was able to do through Perplexity, the paid version, is run these different markets and go the jobs per housing unit. That's the metric. And I'm going to have to pull up a larger version of this. Okay, so we have the first one would be Cleveland, Ohio. We have 1.34 jobs per housing unit, and that is growing, right? So we're above 1.2. We're in growth phase here. All of these are in growth phase. So to my surprise, my theory isn't that like when we get into these red markets here, you get down in Tampa, Florida, that's 1.46 jobs per housing unit. So what my thesis is people were going to work from home and the jobs weren't actually in those states. And then when people get called back to the office, that demand gets sucked up. So therefore the builders overbuilt, but not according to this, not according to the data that was pulled. So it is telling me that in Tampa, there's actually a shortage of housing. There's 1.46 housing jobs per housing unit. And then I had them pull the jobs added since 2020, and then the new units built since 2020. So Tampa had 85,000 jobs added, and then 13,600 new units built. And then they created a ratio of jobs added to new units, 6.3. And then Miami didn't add that many housing units. So if you look at Miami, they added 210,000 jobs, but only 10,400 units. Now, I've got to dig in specifics on why Miami, Florida, if that's the city proper or if that's the greater region. I'm not exactly sure where this data pulls out. I don't have as much control with it as I would like on this AI. I'm still learning it, but it gets us kind of where we need to be. Dallas, Texas, 1.4 jobs per housing unit. 420,000 jobs were added. That's when all those companies were leaving, like California and stuff. So since 2020, they added 420,000 jobs, but they only built 105,000 housing units. But then when we go to here, Dallas is sitting down at what, almost 3% price drop. Okay, so this is huge. So if you can go into the Dallas market and you can get a builder to buy down your rate, that demand is actually there when things come back. Right now, it's just kind of there's a lull in the market. But if those jobs are real and the interest rates drop again, that demand is going to be there. They don't have enough housing units. There technically is still, based on this, a shortage of housing units in Dallas. Phoenix, Arizona, that's 1.38. That's almost 1.4. Remember, the closer you get to 1.5, the more demand there is. Closer to 1 is the house prices get weaker. So 210,000 jobs added, only 31,000 units. They added 6.8 jobs for every housing unit. So that Phoenix is, here we go. Phoenix would also be another one. I highlighted the ones that really intrigued me. Denver, Colorado. Now this looks good. So some of these look good. And then like Minneapolis is on here too. The numbers look good, but there's a reason the numbers are low is because it's very difficult to add units there and to add units in the price point you need. But they are showing up where they desperately need housing units, but it's very difficult to get building permits in Denver. Both Minneapolis and Denver are kind of they're run by a smart growth policy on urban sprawl. They're trying to control the growth of the city, so they force up land prices to try to contain that growth. Or Dallas and Florida, they don't do that kind of thing. Same with Arizona. Memphis, Tennessee, also that looks like real potential. 1.47. Seattle's 1.43. Los Angeles, California is 1.44. And then Las Vegas, Nevada is also a good one at 1.41. So these markets, there's opportunity in these red markets because that demand, as long as the jobs are there, that demand is real. What happens when AI takes over? Okay, so that's the other thing. Can this metric work anymore? So, and I don't know how to quantify that. So the jobs per housing unit metric has always been the basis for adding or needing or not needing housing in a market. What happens when you have a large percentage of the population that retires? What happens when AI takes over and all these people go on to universal basic income? We still need housing units, but the metric for the jobs may not be there. We're not there yet, so I still think this is a safe metric to use. But I would definitely look into the Texas market, the Dallas, maybe Miami, Tampa, Austin. I don't have the data for Austin, so I couldn't compare it in here. For some reason, the data wasn't pulling up. But I would look into those because these builders are buying those rates down. So you can lock into these low rates, and there should be demand there still based on these jobs. And you can double check these numbers, run it through, see where it's pulling it from. The source that it told me is, I'm looking on the other screen here. Okay, Chicago, San Francisco, Miami, New York, more than 10 new jobs for every new home delivered since 2020. So Boston, Washington, D.C., Cleveland, Nashville, underbuilt also. And then Washington, D.C. is another market you should probably be a little careful of if there's mass layoffs from Doge. That housing market could change quickly. So then you got to also kind of look at where the jobs are coming, where they're going, and what kind of housing units needed. So the data sources are U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, U.S. Census Bureau, and then they say proprietary metro housing market and analytics 2025 projections. So take that with a grain of salt, but this is showing that Dallas, Orlando, Phoenix, Miami, Tampa, and probably Austin if I had the data. There's still demand there, and there's just a temporary lull, probably from the insurance rates, probably from the interest rates, and the market's spooked right now. So I wouldn't rule these cities out. I think that market's going to come back unless these jobs disappear. So then you got to kind of watch the news and see where jobs are headed. What's going to happen, who's hiring, where they're going to move to. Um, There we go. I'm back. Okay. So that's the data I was looking at. And, it's based on jobs. Where are the jobs going to be? If you look at the AI, the tech, everything's going that direction. Robots are coming out and they say, what, another 18 months. Um, we're gonna have a shakeup in the labor market, and then the blue collar or the white collar work is going to get hit hard. I hear lawyers are getting laid off at companies because a lot of that stuff can be sourced out to the software on AI and stuff. So you got built-in law firm on the AI. Yeah, I mean, you got a built-in research facility right on this stuff too. Okay, so yes, why do you use Perplexity? I was watching some accountants that also use it that just had a live stream. Also saw Aaron Clary watches you in old videos. The one where you thought he was lying. I don't know which video that was, but yeah, I wouldn't put it past Aaron Clary. Um, so Perplexity, I use Grok. I pay for Grok. I pay for Perplexity. I pay for the Google AI Labs. I don't use ChatGPT. I think I just kind of don't like to run with the mainstream. So the Perplexity's got a great research capability, is why I use it. Grok has the ability to do a little bit more than Perplexity has, but for research and stuff, Perplexity seems to be the leader in that, and they document their sources, so it's easy to kind of trace back where they're pulling their data from. That's why I use Perplexity. I'm still trying to figure out which is the best one. I also use a few others that or custom AI, and I'm just experimenting with it. I'm not a genius with it. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just trying to learn it because the world's changing rapidly. So I thought this was a good way to use it, and I'll try to build models from it and see if I can get better data going forward. And then, a line about the movie The Accountant. Yes. Yes. Aaron Clary, yeah, yeah. I remember that conversation now. I never did see The Accountant. He said it was a good movie, and I said he was lying. Um, Nashville also needs housing. Yes, let me go back and add that to the stage. Um, Nashville's 1.36 jobs per housing unit. So they added 220,000 jobs since 2020, and they only built 16,000 units. Before you invest, I would definitely rerun these numbers and make sure that this data is coming from a greater metro area, that this isn't like leaving out a suburb that handled that supply. Um, I don't think it does because I asked for MSAs, metropolitan statistical areas, but I don't know if they're actually pulling city proper until I double check these figures. But yeah, according to this, Nashville needs housing units also. And then Schwain is here. How you doing, Schwain? How did the project go? Did you get the ladder? Did you get the gutters cleaned? He came up with a great idea. So let me know if I can share it on your concept. The other thing we have here is we can kind of run through the metropolitan statistics are here. All right, I'm going to share this chart. Okay, this is National Association of Realtors just came out with their metro market statistics dashboard. So impact of lower rates. So number of households that can this is for New York, New Jersey. I want a different market. I don't care about that market. Schwain will appreciate this local market stat. Minneapolis, St. Paul. Okay. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 7% mortgage rates. Number of households that can afford to buy the medium priced home, 679,839. Renter households, 93,747 of them can also buy a home. At 6%, that number jumps up substantially. to 761,000 basically, and 117,000. And I do think we're going to see 6% rates. Every time I say that, though, it shoots back up. So if mortgage rates fell from 7% to 6%, 81,112 more households would afford the median priced home, including 22,971 renters. While 10% of these households typically buy a home, 8,111 additional home sales are expected in the next 12 to 18 months in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. Okay, so if we have Minneapolis-St. Paul, I forget what we have. We have, let me look it up. We have like 8,000 housing units. So that extra demand would take every listing we have. All right, fast stats, 16 county metro area. Inventory of homes for sale is like 9,700. So we have 9,700 homes for sale. And if interest rates drop to 6%, that'd be 8,000 more home buyers to the market. We're going to see another run up in prices. And it's just, we don't have enough housing units for the next generation is what it boils down to. Just to kind of forewarn you. So I wouldn't be afraid to buy in housing. I don't think we're going to see a crash. Housing affordability, monthly payment 2131, qualifying income is 102,000. Price to income ratio is 3.2. That's right in there. Housing affordability index is 124. So if you have 100%, 100 is 100% of the income, median income to qualify for the median house. This is 124. So people have the income to qualify for the house. It's just people don't want to. They just complain. But this is in line. Payment to income ratio is 20%. Let's see, share of income, homeowners, renters. Okay. I'm kind of going through this for the first time. Housing statistics. Sales price, listings, and indices over the years. Okay, so green is price index. Not sure the metric on the price index. That's a new one. 104 listings index. So price is going up, listings going down. Blue is sales index. Okay, so sales were hot, and then interest rates came up and they broke. Home equity gain. This is Minnesota. Wow. Not sure exactly what that's telling us. So if we go 6 years, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota, 6 years after purchase of the median priced home equity is 139,620. After 10 years, it's 219,000. So they must be calculating loan pay down and appreciation. Single family permits over the last 12 months. Okay, we were building 16,000 single family permits. We got up to about 20,500, and now we're down around 9,000. We need to keep building. So as long as this remains low, we're going to see added pressure to housing prices going forward. We're enjoying a temporary lull right now. So if you can jump on board, I think now would be a good time. Economic conditions, number of all employees. This gets back to you need a job to buy a house. Okay, we went from 1,888,000 to a little over 2 million employees in the Twin Cities metro area. Average weekly earnings, the income is going up. That's average weekly, 69,000 annually. 3% unemployment, 2% wage growth, 0.8% job growth. That's what we talked about earlier, is looking where the jobs are going to go. And that's where you need to be. The people are going to follow the jobs. So as this industry, as the world starts changing, they got to build power plants to support all these warehouses that house all the computer stuff for the AI. So kind of follow that around the country where that's being built. As manufacturing, some of that's going to get reshored. Some of these manufacturers are going to start manufacturing back in the States. They're going to have to be where there's cheap energy. So start looking where they're building energy plants, where they're building nuke plants, coal plants, hydro plants. The wind and solar, I don't think is there yet. Maybe it will be in the future, but right now, I don't think a factory is going to build based off of wind and solar. They're going to need something more reliable and cost effective. Okay, so we got home buyers, who's a racial ethnic group of all Americans, 37 years old. Wow. Income of 111,000. Look at this. It's those meddling kids. 37.6% were in the 25 to 34 age group. And we were all blaming the boomers who are here, 12.7. So everyone's piling on these people. And this is Gen X, and this is millennials. It looks like Gen Z's starting to come out of the gate, and some of the millennials there. Females are buying more houses than men, almost 55% to 45%. Migration moved within the state. So Minnesota typically stays that way. Married couple, almost half of them were married. 7.7 living alone male, 11% female. Okay, most of them were between 100 and 115 or 150,000 is where the buyers were. Most of them had a bachelor's degree. Yay, everyone's got a college degree. It's not unique. 1980 to 1999 is the year built. Most of them were built in that range. That's kind of interesting because we didn't do the new energy codes till probably the late 90s, 97 maybe is when we did category 1. So the 1980s, you could still build cost-effective housing. You could do the 2x4 construction, 2x6. You didn't have to do the vapor barrier. You didn't have the machine pumping in air exchanger, pumping in fresh air. You could actually build affordable housing back then. So it's interesting, the housing stock that's getting bought right now is that age group, not the newer McMansion stuff. Homeownership demographics, 70% are homeowners in this median range. 81% is 45 to 64. Okay, that makes sense. They're a little more established. And median household income. Wow. Oh, I see what it's saying. Okay. Yeah. And if you had earned over 500,000 a year, 96.3% of them own their home. So if you want to be wealthy, look at what they're doing. Most of them are owning their home. Homeownership by rate, racial or by racial ethnic group. 76.1% white, 34.3% black, 65.7% Asian, 58.3% Hispanic. Okay, that's what I got. To the questions. How do I do this now? Remove. All right, Schwayne says job went well, took about 4 hours. For gutters and power wash, 120 an hour isn't bad. Okay, that's, yeah. Where do you make 120 bucks an hour? And how did you go find the job? You just went up and knocked on the door? I mean, that honestly, if you just go out and do a little bit of hustle like Schwayne did, and you just pick up the side cash, you clean some gutters and power washed a house, threw a number at them, knocked it out in 4 hours. Yeah, you can make a good living. And then this gets to another topic. So there's a couple channels out there buy these boring businesses, right? And I get all excited. Yeah, you can buy these businesses and stack them. And yeah, extra income. And yeah, they cash flow like rental properties because there's no work involved. and then like buy this business and stick someone in to operate it. Well, it doesn't work that way. So I don't know if you saw the previous video. I'm turning over a housing, a unit, and I run into the problem. I got to swap out, the water heater, furnace, and a bunch of other stuff. And I'm trying to do the work myself, and I get caught in a jam. So I call my friend. He's a plumber. He's been in the business forever. He grew up in the plumbing business. And he's, real easygoing guy, just always there to help. And, it comes and it helps me out. And I'm like, you won't get that. Like, that is the plumber. That's not, you don't buy that business. That's the person. That's who you hire. That's someone reliable, someone dependable. You're not calling, BlackRock or Blackstone or whatever, Black Sheep investments to go run their business, because you're not really buying that individual on these small trades, right? So that plumbing business is still the relationship business. I know he's going to fix it. And that's what the market needs. It doesn't need someone to come in and someone who's got an MBA is going to quick, run the spreadsheet and figure out how to cut costs. They're going to cut here. They're going to, get rid of the receptionist, and then they got it down to just a skeleton, and there's no business. And then they buy another business and stack it on top of it. Then they try to resell it. I mean, we did that in the 80s. So when these corporate raiders would go buy these businesses, these corporations were junk bonds, and then, there's took generations to build these, like Ford, started the assembly plant, and, all these people started these tractor, the industrial revolution. They put their heart and soul into building this company. And then during the 80s, you had these corporate raiders that go in, buy these, and then sell off all the assets to make money. And that's kind of what this is kind of doing. I mean, it looks great on a spreadsheet, but when you actually have to actually do the work, trying to find someone to do the work is near impossible. But what Schwane's doing is he's just grabbing it and just going. He's going to have more business. He's going to have more work than he can handle before long. Okay, so Zfall. I'd hate to live in Minneapolis. That place is like one step away from being in LA or another riot zone. No, I hear you. It's just every day it just seems to get crazier and crazier. I don't know if you follow me on X, but there was nice shopping. I mean, it was always a nice place to be, is downtown Minneapolis. You had this Nicollet Mall is what they called it. So all the storefronts, you had this nice little bus route and nice pedestrian. That was all your shops, always beautiful. And then there's this guy, it looks like San Francisco, just taking a dump right in front of a window of one of these businesses. And it's just a shame to watch what the city has done. And it does overflow into the suburbs. The suburbs near Minneapolis are experiencing it. Even the third, fourth ring suburbs are starting to feel it. So it is a problem. I'm hoping that it's going to reverse, but man, the more I see it, the more I'm really nervous on it. They're basically turning farmland that's producing food and turning it into solar farms. So some people are going to starve for their AI. Yeah, that solar is not right now that efficient. I kind of hope that there's some technology right around the corner that can harvest it. I mean, if we do have all that energy coming from the sun, I do believe that is energy. How do we capture it? I don't think taking up all the farmland for these solar farms, and then a hailstorm comes by and destroys it all, and then you have to replace them with fossil fuels to reproduce the solar panels, so you spend more energy than you've actually gained from them. I don't think that's a solution. I do think there is probably a solution out there that hopefully they can capture, but the current system that they're doing, I don't think is it. So we'll see where it goes. Yeah, it's exactly right. Microsoft likes getting carbon credits, which brings up a good point. I like biographies and I like history. So Minnesota, and I kind of go into the history of Minnesota, is it was basically the state existed for a couple of reasons: the natural resources, and we had a waterfall and on the Mississippi River that we could then run mills off of, sawmills and flour mills and stuff. And we had the farmland for the flour to produce the flour. So we became the flour city and became a lumber town. But basically what really built this is a guy. and the guy, his name is James J. Hill, and he came in 1893. There was a huge there was a big economic crash, right? I mean, the government went broke. Everyone was thinking that the government was going to collapse or whatever. But in 1893, a lot of companies went bankrupt, and a railroad went bankrupt. So James J. Hill came in with a couple investors, and he was running riverboats, he was a freight forwarder, basically. He was running freight up and down the Mississippi and up the Red River into Canada. So he bought this bankrupt railroad that kind of went from Minneapolis out to Wilmer, Minnesota. And then he connected it and shot up to Fargo, and then tied in that Red River Valley, which is just fertile land. So what he understood is he understood the natural resources of the farmland and getting the goods to market, because he was a freight forwarder. And then he got all the goods to Minneapolis, and then he tied in up to Lake Superior, and then he ran boats out of Lake Superior all the way out to New York, and then so he could connect Minnesota to the Europe markets, and then he ran that rail line all the way up to Seattle. So it was the Transcontinental Railroad, basically, and then so he could connect Minneapolis, Chicago, all the way to Seattle, and then he could boat all his goods out to New York to hit. Then he had the shipping lanes to get out to the Asian markets and the Europe markets. So he connected all of Minnesota's lumber, farming, agriculture, and logging and mining all throughout the world. So that's really why Minnesota got built. But why I wanted to bring this up, Zefel, is he did things different. At the time, the government, you're talking about government subsidies that Microsoft wants, the carbon credits. What he did differently is when the government was paying these railroad barons to go build, they paid them by the mile. So the railroad barons were running circular tracks, right? They were trying to get as much government money as they could by making lots of turns in the railroad. He didn't do that. He didn't care about the subsidy. He ran the straightest shot he could, and he ran the lowest grades he could, so the train could hit high speeds, so he could be as most efficient with that railroad. Rather than going for the government subsidies on the per mile basis, he was going for efficiency. He was building that model. And it's an interesting biography too. It's a semi-autobiography, and I'll post it later. But he was going for the actual market and not the government subsidies, like you're talking about with Microsoft buying the carbon credits. If someone wanted to solve this, they could do it, but they're not. They're looking for the tax write-offs. They're looking for the tax shelters. They're building that train track with lots of turns in it, not building it for efficiency and getting the goods to the market. So that is a historical reference that I did want to bring up on that one. So got a little sidetrack there. So where's the graphic from? On the screenshot, that one was done on Grok. So I had Grok do that one. And then if we were serious about low waste, high energy output electrical infrastructure, you would hear from them building, what is fast neutron reactors, FNRs. I'm not familiar with that. Current reactors are less than 5% use. Oh, okay. I'll have to look at FNRs. I'm not familiar with that. My father was in nuclear power. He was head of quality assurance for the local power plants, for the nuclear power plants. So I'd been through them and toured them, and I kind of understand the basics of it. I'm not an expert on it, but he did teach me the principles on it. So during Jimmy Carter's term, Jimmy Carter had a nuclear background, ironically, but he put a halt on reburning this fuel. So we couldn't reburn so we put in the fuel rods into the nuclear power plants and we burn it, and we have to stop. We can keep burning that over and over again, and until ultimately we end up with waste that we can't burn anymore. But what we do is we burn it one time, and then we have to store it, and we're trying to store it in caves and I forget which reservation down in Nevada or something, and then they wouldn't allow that. So then our local power plant had to come up with storage caskets on site. So they built basically these big cement tombs. that can be dropped from an airplane at 30,000 feet and not split open. I mean, I've got bolts on these, and these bolts are like huge, because my dad was working on that project. And so, I've got maybe I don't have it here, but I could show you some of those bolts. But we have to store that nuclear waste because we can't reburn it because of Jimmy Carter. So if I'm looking at what you're saying, you're calling it fast neutron reactors. Maybe that's new technology I'm not familiar with, but those spent fuel that can be reburned and reburned and reburned. And I don't know why Jimmy Carter did it. I believe that eventually you refine it into weapons grade, is what he was concerned about. I really don't understand why he did that. But yeah, we are wasting a lot of energy there. A lot of our government policies actually slow us down and really restrict it, and is kind of under the disguise of being good, but it's actually kind of nefarious. Okay, so homeschool time. Looking at my area fixer uppers, and it seems the youth are no competition at all in terms of purchasing them. Good price, location, yet no competition on buying side. Enjoy it, homeschool. I don't know, what market are you in? That would be interesting to find out. So my perception of Gen Y is, I'm going to say this is what you're talking about, is Gen Y, is there's like two classes of Gen Y. There are the go-getters, the hustlers. I'm seeing a lot of these guys are coming into the trades. They're doing the work. They're good. They have common sense, and I have a lot of hope for this generation because what I'm seeing has really impressed me. And then there's this other side that I'm sitting in a store and I see men dressed in dresses and wearing purses, and I don't know what's going on there. So there's, I don't know. The times are different. But what I've seen on the job site, I'm seeing these young men come into the trades and I'm really impressed with them. So I've got a lot of hope for them. So enjoy it while you can, pull out ahead as far ahead as you can, because that competition will show up. You're first to the race. Don't think that you're all alone. They're right behind you. So nice going though. Okay, yep. Zifo about that historical reference. Yeah, we're talking about James J. Hill. Um, Too bad the Minnesota government has ruined the state, specifically the Twin Cities. Yes, I have blinding optimism and denial. I know you probably came from, I think Zifo mentioned Aaron Clary. He gave up and he moved out of state. I've got a number of friends that did and just don't see any hope. I've got blinding optimism and denial. I do think that the people that vote this way aren't really aware of what they're doing yet, and I do hope that things will change. But yeah, it's looking pretty bleak. Okay, yep. Okay, so that sounds like we're talking the nuclear fuel rods. So we're on the same topic, but it sounds like there's technology that you can burn all of it instead of just that. So it sounds like they did develop some new technology. I'll have to look into that. Thank you. Or could it was just electricity, hiking, camping, swimming? You know, um, I was kind of thinking of doing a video on this homeschool. So I look back to, I was talking about the Gen Y. I'm in my early 20s, right? I'm probably like 20, 21. And I love the outdoors. I'm sitting by a lake fishing, right? And we got this little lake, portage into, I drink right out of the lake and no one's around there, right? It's just kind of like it's out in the wilderness, Boundary Waters kind of set up, except Boundary Waters is too crowded for me. Um, so, so I find these other little lakes and I was kind of at that age going, well, what should I do? I could kind of, what direction do I go in life? Do I just hang out? And I could have a really good life just fishing and hunting and enjoying the outdoors. Or do I want to kind of pursue the traditional route, maybe get married, have kids, have a family someday, and, pursue work, kind of pursue that. And kind of on this lake is a little beaver pond, right? The beaver dammed up this lake, and I'm kind of watching the beavers. And I'm like, okay, that's their natural instinct, is to build. And I kind of determined that I'm a builder, right? That's just kind of that net that I think most Americans are, most of us are. We have this intuitive nature to build and try to improve our surroundings, our life. And so I love nature. I love getting back to the basics and don't lose that. Um, but we are builders, right? We do have to create. We are part of nature, and we got to be responsible for it and not lose connection with that outdoors. I still spend a lot of time outdoors. If I go back in hindsight, there are times I think, man, maybe I should have just done that because it was not what I thought it was going to be. It was a lot harder. But I think this new generation is a little wiser from what my generation went through. We got the snot kicked out of us. You guys have a chance at least. All right. It's all coping ending up with weapons grade. Yeah. Okay. So it is all BS. Got it. Govern control meant mind, word origin. Okay. Yep. Government control the mind. Interesting. I had never kind of put those together, but yeah, if those are the root words, it's kind of interesting how they said that. And the other one is like TV programming, right? What is a TV program? It programs what we hear, what we think. Okay, you moved out of Minnesota too. It's just me left. Ah, you did come from Aaron. Okay, welcome aboard. Glad to have you. Boundary waters are too crowded for me. Yes. Yeah. So yeah, welcome here. And yeah, that's kind of what I got. Just kind of a rant. Got a lot of thoughts. I'm gonna wrap up a few projects here and try to spend a little more time on YouTube. I got hit with a bunch of vacancies turning units over, and I don't know if you saw that previous video. I took a house back and had over 50,000 in damage. So I had to fix that one up, and I do most of the work myself just because that's kind of I grew up in the business kind of thing. I started in construction is how I ended up being a realtor. And yes, ZFO. Yep, I am a realtor. Yep. So yeah, if you got any real estate questions, feel free to ask. My background is construction. I've been a home builder. I've built homes. I haven't built in probably 15, 20 years. I do remodeling now. And then I've developed real estate. I was doing these condo projects, 50 plus unit condo buildings just before the housing crash. So I was sitting on three of those with as a partner on 2008 hit and crashed all around us, and spent a lot of years licking my wounds trying to climb back out of that hole. And now I built up a rental portfolio. And Aaron knew me back in the day, and he was doing banking at the time, and he was doing underwriting. And he wrote a book about it. In fact, it's right up here on the back wall. Is this in that white behind the housing crash? And he was kind of ground level, and we would talk about what was happening there, and the straw buyers and all the stuff he saw in the banking industry. And we kind of saw it coming. I did too, but that was, I was in it. I couldn't unravel what I had done. So ZFO, yes, 50,000 in damage. How did you deal with that? Yeah, it gets rid of any profit. Seems risks are high and claim insurance. They're going to follow you. Yes. Okay, so this is how that goes down, Zeph. I'll kind of break down one of these deals so you kind of understand how it works. So it's a big number, but we're dealing with big numbers. Okay, so I'll go find a house, and this particular house needed a lot of work, and it's sitting on a lot of land, so it has development potential. So I am hoping to turn this. It's like 4 acres in a great area, and the house is a 1960s built, and it's on well and septic. It's got a barn on it and stuff. So I want to redevelop this, and then I run into problems with the city, and I can't connect to the city sewer, even though it's right in the front street. But they want like 200 and some $1,000 for me to connect because I have to connect these 7 houses. So they're giving me all sorts of obstacles. So I'm like, okay, I'll fix it up, I'll rent it, and then just buy time and wait to develop it, right? Because I stick a renter in there, my basis on it is pretty low. I'm going to do it for like $250,000, $260,000, and the property is going to appraise for about 400,000. because of the land, right? The land is the value. And it's, but as a house, it's not worth much because it needed the work. So I go there and fix it up and I get a renter in there. And then I get a renter in there. I rent it to two people and the septic starts backing up. And then there's other damage, right? So after they moved out, I kind of figured their water usage and they had at least 8 people in there. That water had to be running all the time. So they oversaturated the septic system. The septic was original to the 60s. So I don't know if it was on the last leg or if they actually wiped it out completely. But then with that backup, that whole basement had to be gutted and I had to redo that. And then when I had put in vinyl click together flooring and they were throwing buckets of water on it. So when I pulled up that flooring, there was water underneath it, mold growing. So I had to rip all that out and then, seal that, the subfloor in that. And then that kitchen cabinets were destroyed. My appliances were destroyed. There was a hole burned in my cooktop and those were brand new appliances. They weren't even in there just over 12 months. And then the back wall behind the sink, I had to rip open that sheetrock because I was still getting this musty mold smell, and that whole wall was saturated, so that whole sink was overflowing. So I ended up cutting that kitchen down and got the bathroom down and redoing all the flooring and redoing that whole basement. And then I'm on schedule to have the septic replaced because I can't deal with the city on the 200 some thousand to connect. So I can bypass the city and just go to the state on that. With the septic because the city has nothing to say about the septic. So that's kind of where that money comes from. So basically, I had to put in an extra so far 25,000, and there's enough equity in there where I can borrow that back out. But you're right, that's real money. It cuts into the rents. So that's kind of how the game is played. You got to buy the property right. You got to put in value. So a simpler deal with less risk would be to try to buy the house, and this is the formula you need to use. Is you go after repair value. So let's just say I need a calculator for this. Let's just say your after repair value is a median home price of 400,000. Okay, so now you want to pay 70% of that. You don't want to pay more than 280 for it. And if you need to put 30 grand into it, you take off that 30 grand from the 280. So you want to buy it for 250, put in the 30 grand. So you only have 70% of the money into the value. So if you had to refinance, you could get all your cash back out and the rent would still hold. If you were to flip it, this number will work for flipping too. You need 70% for flips to work. You can go to 80% on rentals if it's a good area, but that's the general formula you use on that. So where do you have rentals to move up to the Twin Cities for the U of M after she graduates? I do not have anything in Minneapolis anymore. Student housing, that interests me, but the city of Minneapolis did approve the ability to do rent control. They haven't imposed it yet, but they did pass legislation that would allow them to enact it if they ever decided to. St. Paul did impose rent control. So I stay out of St. Paul and I stay out of Minneapolis because of that. And I try to stay in further out markets that have less regulations on it. I don't know. I paid to have that septic system pumped many times, so I have no idea what was in there. I don't watch it as they pump it out. Let's see. Yeah, that's a great question. Why do renters do so much damage? It's fascinating because you get some renters that are absolutely wonderful and they turn the house back and it's in perfect shape, little wear and tear. It's normal. You got other renters that I don't understand how they do this, but they absolutely destroy a place and they don't even know it. And some do it. Some just, well, I learned this during the housing crash too, as we were selling houses to people that should be renters, right? We were trying to make everybody a homeowner, and that's why the housing market crashed. Is people that shouldn't have been homeowners were buying houses and they weren't taking care of them. and they were falling apart. So when these foreclosures happened, these houses were trashed. I mean, and then they started ripping out the copper and just got these houses. But even just the regular maintenance, they weren't doing anything. They just some people are just wired that way. And we talked about, you talked about being close to nature, beavers, builders. Some are just kind of, I don't know, leeches. I don't know what you'd compare them to, but yeah, they don't, they're non-productive. They destroy things, not build. And then other people, and it's not homeowners versus renters. It's just some people are just wired that way. But yeah, drugs, alcohol, crime, and mental illness are huge factors in that. Mental illness, I can kind of see it with hoarding stuff. If I start seeing a lot of stuff going in there, hoarding is one. Drugs and alcohol, I've got a background with alcohol, so I'm kind of familiar with that. So I can kind of see the early signs on that one. Um, yeah, the other ones, I don't think they cared. The ones that did all that damage. It was I think it was kind of their culture. I think back where they came from, you could throw buckets of water because you didn't have wood framing. It was probably cement floors. So they probably thought that was normal. So I'd rip up, the flooring, and then the baseboards were all destroyed too. So I think that's the kind of culture, and then move extended family in, that kind of stuff. I think that was normal for them. And then people, just the amount of people there is what caused the damage. Um, yeah, they just don't care. Let's see. Buddy rented a house, a couple of them. Girls who were in relationships, when they left, every single thing they left behind went straight into a large dumpster, house full of crap. Okay, that's interesting. So let's say that happens and you're the landlord, you're the property owner. Minnesota is going to require you to hang on to that stuff for, I think, 6 months. So you have to put that stuff in a storage locker or get permission to throw it away. Because they can come back later and ask for that stuff. And if you had thrown it away, you're liable for it. Then you're going to be, the court's going to determine how much money you owe them. So you have to be careful with that. So you got to make some judgment calls occasionally on that one. But yeah, I've run into that situation and I made judgment calls on it, and it's panned out okay. I have held on to stuff. I've got a storage building that I do keep some stuff in from time to time when that happens, and then I end up after a while just throwing it out. So, uh, do you think you would have been better off without renters or having better tenant screening? My odds are pretty good as it is. I've got, that's my nightmare scenario, and I did the screening. They had good credit, they had good jobs, and all the criteria was met. What had happened is they lost jobs, and then suddenly I was being paid by a nonprofit organization, was covering their rent, and then they brought in, I think, people to help them financially. And I think really what happened is they brought in their daughter's family, and that's where the problem came from. And I was too laxed. I could have cracked down on it. I suspected that was going on. And then anytime I would go look at the house, they'd make me wait 3 days, and then I could go into the house. And when I'd get in there, all the bedrooms were empty except for the master bedroom. So I knew something was up, but I couldn't quite prove it. And I kind of wrote out the year. We were also going through that time where evictions were very difficult. So the courts were still backed up from COVID. So it was a 12-month long wait to go through eviction process. So I wasn't going to go that route. I was going to write out the lease. And then once that lease was out, I didn't renew it. And then I gave them time to get out. So it went just over a year. So those are the chances you take. That's my only nightmare scenario. I've never had to really go through an eviction. I had one that got committed by the state, and the family, I worked a deal with them, and they got her to sign the cancellation of the lease, and I was able to re-rent it, so I wasn't out anything there. So I've had a couple close calls, but just what makes it hard is you got to play by certain rules where renters don't have to. But for the most part, my screening process works pretty well. Yeah, you gotta. most people are good. You can't be in their business. You do take that chance with the housing. This is the nightmare story. Most of the time, I get these houses back in good shape. Most of my renters are fantastic. They'll call me up and say, "Hey, the air conditioner is making a noise. Can you come look at it?" Perfect. I can get on top of it before it becomes a big issue. So that's most of what that is. And then also the markets I buy in determine who rents it. So I kind of focus in on who is my customer going to be and what do they want to rent. And that's what I'm going to buy. I'm building a business. I'm not buying real estate, if that makes sense. Like the temptation on a lot of investors out there is to go and look for a cheap house, and you find a cheap house and say, "Oh, well, this is going to cash flow because it's so cheap." Well, there's a reason it's cheap. It's either cheap because it's out in the middle of nowhere and there's nobody to rent it. So you're going to have a lot of vacancy. Or if you do find renters, it's going to be in a war zone, or it's going to be, you're going to have problems if it's in the middle of nowhere where there's no jobs. So there's a reason there's cheap housing. And then what you want to do is you want to find the great locations, and you want to find something that's relatively affordable in the great locations. And then those are going to be the people that are working, that have the jobs, that are kind of take care of it. They take care of their credit. They usually take care of everything else. So that's kind of what I go by. I've really not seen it go the other way. If someone's got good credit, it's just almost always accurate, unless they move their daughter's family in, and then that's another story. What are the signs of alcohol? Asking for a friend. Shoot me a direct message later. We'll go through it. There's a lot of different signs on it. You can kind of tell. You just kind of, you can't play a player. You just kind of know. So yeah, if you got specific questions, I'll be glad to answer it. My message to youth: go ahead and purchase a fixer upper. Thus, you can own a home debt free in under 9 years. 100% homeschool time. You are on the money. You're like me when I was younger. So, I go back to sitting by the lake and making that decision. So, what I did from there is I didn't go to college. I went and I started a business, and I was doing window cleaning, and that got into construction cleanup. And then I started working for some builders running job sites, doing the construction cleanup. But basically, I went like Schwayne did and just started hustling work that way, because there's need for it. Like people need their gutters cleaned, but they can't hire a full time, but you can get enough people to feed you more work than you can handle. So I went self-employed, and I did window cleaning. I did construction cleanup. I had janitorial in the winter and carpet cleaning. And then I bought my house. I was 20 years old when I bought my house. I couldn't buy beer at the time. And then I bought a little house in Minneapolis. It was, at the time, it was 93, I think it was. It was $47,000. And it was a little 2 bedroom, like 750 square feet, just tiny little thing, 1.5 car garage, nice area. And today that house is worth about 4 times what it was. Okay. It's still the same distance. You can still do that today, like homeschool's talking about. The dollar's worth less. Like back then, I was, the minimum wage was $3.15 or $3.18. Today, the minimum wage is what, $12 or $15. So that spread is still the same. I was going independent, so I was probably pulling in $12 an hour, maybe 15 an hour on some of the jobs. Today, if you went independent, like Schwayne was talking, he's over $100 an hour on that job, right? Some jobs you might lose on, right? And just kind of underestimate how much time it takes. But overall, he's going to get close to that $100 an hour. So you're probably, if you go independent, I told you in another video, if you hold a screw gun, you could probably charge $65 an hour out there as a general handyman right now, without a lot of skill. So that spread to get into your first house and do a fixer upper to build some equity, make that stretch and do it. It seems like it's a daunting task. And if you watch YouTube and you watch all these doomers, it seems like it can't be done, but it can be done. You just got to, focus on the positive and not the negative stuff out there. What? Minimum wage is $7.25 now? How come McDonald's is paying 15? Like McDonald's was like 318 at the time. So, but if anyone wants anything, they got to pay at least $12 an hour, right? Otherwise, you're not going to fill anything at 725. I don't think. Okay, I was looking at a 20-bedroom, 10-bath apartment around 750 with some very old tenants. Also see a cheap church that's 100% a B&B for 250. Um, yeah, so location. Where is that apartment building? And then go back to what we talked about earlier. And are there jobs around there? Or are you doing Section 8? Are you going to be having people on subsidies living there? Um, there's people that make money doing that. I don't, but it can be done. It's a different market. You got a different clientele, and you're gonna have a different set of problems. I kind of look at trying to follow the jobs. That's where the housing demand is, and I kind of follow. The idea is if you get into a good school district, half the parents are going to get divorced, and one of them, at least one of them's got to stay in the school district and can't afford to buy and need something affordable to rent. So then I started buying these little townhomes in these great school districts, and I've got, I just turned one over, and I had over 30 applicants for it. The other one I had over 50. So there's huge demand for that kind of product that's affordable in the good locations. And when I started comparing that, when I started doing this, when that formula started working, that was cheaper buying those individually than buying a building. I could buy those per door cheaper than I could buy that 20 or 10 unit building. So that's something to consider too. So I would look at where it's located, and then I would use just kind of rough estimate. You could use like the gross rent multiplier of 100. You can go to probably 110. You're going to have about a 40% expense ratio on an apartment building like that. So maybe around 100 to 110. So basically, if you took the 750, just go by 110. If you took 750,000 divided by 110, that's going to tell you that you're going to need at least $6,800 a month in rent to cover that, just to cash flow. So if the rents look like they could support that price, you could investigate it further. Then you start sharpening your pencil and running the actual income and expenses. But that's kind of a good way to rule things out, is use the monthly gross rent multiplier. Single family homes, you can go to about 120. Is with the higher interest rates, you kind of back it down to 110 right now. And then you've probably heard of the 1% rule. That worked for a while, but that's not a good way to do it. The 1% rule is just a gross monthly rent multiplier of 100 is how that works. So now you can go the other way too. So let's say that 20-bedroom apartment only makes, let's just say it makes 5,000 a month. So now take 5,000 times 110. The building's only worth 550. So that the monthly gross rent multiplier works both ways. You can take the price and divide it, and they'll tell you how much rent you need, or you can take the rent and multiply it by that monthly gross rent multiplier, and they'll tell you what you can pay. So that's a way to quickly estimate if something's worth looking into. It's not enough to buy something off of, but it's a way to kind of narrow it down and see if it makes sense. Cheap church, that's 100% B&B for 250. Bed and breakfast is a business. That's a hospitality business. So I wouldn't look at that as a rental. You're going to buy a job in a lot of ways. They're good markets if it's a lifestyle you want. There's people that do really well on it. I had clients years ago that they had a couple mansions, and they were selling one of them, and I was working with them to sell one of their buildings, and they were doing these small hotels and bed and breakfasts, and they did extremely well. They made millions, but they were in the hospitality business, and you're in a boutique hotel is what you're doing, and there is money in those. But from my understanding, is they're cyclical with the economy. When the economy's good, they're printing money, and when the economy lightens up, that's one of the first things that get cut. But if you can buy it right and you like the lifestyle, I think that's worth pursuing. All right. Look forward to it. So, all right, that's all I got. It's about 7:30 here. So shoot me a message if you got any questions. And that's about all I got. And we'll talk to you soon. Have a good one.